Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about writing, editing, publishing, literature, the arts, and more. I am Ito Utini.
And I'm Makaya Utini, and today we're speaking with Ben Krause. Ben writes music that is characterized by its visceral, rhythmic drive, tight motivic control, and colorful, dense harmonies reminiscent of jazz. He holds degrees in composition from Rice University and the University of Oregon, and has received awards, residencies, and commissions from the Houston Symphony Orchestra, the Atlantic Chamber Players, Copeland House, Network for New Music, the American Conservatory in Fontainebleau, France, and others. We're excited to be with him today.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. I'm a composer and pianist. I've played a lot of contemporary music, concert music. I grew up as a classical pianist, learning a lot of the standard repertoire. And in college, and since then, I've gotten really into jazz. So that's where I'm coming from as a performer. And my main activity as a musician is as a composer. I write music for orchestra, for choirs, for chamber music, so smaller combinations of instruments, but generally music in the Western classical tradition. I grew up in a fairly musical household. My sisters both took either like piano or violin lessons, and my brother also ended up being a pianist, at least growing up. And so I was around music quite a bit and was always encouraged in the arts. And so when I was really young, like 5, 6, 7 years old, I would watch my older sister practice the piano, and I was really eager to start myself, and I would try to learn the songs or the pieces that she was playing. And I was always at the piano making up my own little songs or bits of material. So I finally was able to start taking lessons when I was 8 years old. And from there, although my interest in it kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, like when I was in middle school, around 12 or 13 years old, I kind of lost interest for a while. I was more interested in playing the guitar and trying to be in a band, play other styles of music. I ended up getting a lot more into it later in high school and devoted my college years, and since then, to both the piano and composition.
Can you share some advice for others in your field who maybe have not been doing it as long? Where and how do you find opportunities?
Yeah, in some ways, that's a really big question because a lot of it, as a student, if you're an undergraduate or, even master's or doctoral student in composition, you'll probably be exposed to certain opportunities that are for student composers or young composers. And there are some specific ones that, will come up annually. And so there's kind of that phase of your development where you're putting your music out there, you're submitting. And then as, at least in my experience, as you progress through school and maybe leave school, by that point you've met, hopefully, a lot of other great composers and performers, and you might use that network to propose a piece of music for, let's say, an ensemble or a performer that you know. Maybe somebody you know from school is leading a new concert series in a different city. So sometimes it just ends up happening organically through the connections, personal and professional, that you've made. And then there's another layer to it, which is you can look around. There's different lists that are put online with opportunities that composers can apply to. So I find myself relying on those, or at least finding useful things for myself. That's essentially it.
And in case you're wondering, we have some of those lists on our website too. If you're a writer, composer, visual artist, performer, or scholar, you can find fully funded residencies all around the world at the Datekeepers blog for free. Sharing is caring, so don't forget to share with your friends.
Just recently, I can give a specific example. Like currently, I'm thinking about projects I want to work on for, 2027, 2028, around that time frame. And there's this really fabulous singer that recently I saw her play a concert, actually with my wife on the piano. My spouse is a really accomplished pianist, a really amazing musician, actually. And she plays a lot with vocalists as well as instrumentalists. And they collaborated on a concert. And I reached out to her and talked about proposing a piece I might write for her for a year or two down the road. And we're working on an application for a commission right now. And so that hopefully will, materialize in a year or two with a new project for myself. So nowadays, that's kind of like what I prefer to do. I like to try to envision what kinds of projects I want to work on and then find the people or the organizations that might help work with me on that and then, go from there.
You said something that I really 100% agree with. There are a lot of people who, just apply for things without investing in the community or building connections. How have you been able to build those connections? And can you take us back to when you just started?
Yeah, I mean, it really is the primary thing. I mean, it's the most important thing when you're thinking about creative projects. And, on the one hand, composers, just like writers, we can be very lonely or at least very solitary. And all the work we do on the music itself is a solo effort for the most part, at least for me it is. But really to make the project a real thing, to make music for an audience, it requires a lot of other people. So in a way, that's actually what I love about, besides the music itself, which to me is primary and it's always the most important thing. But about actually working in the field, my favorite thing is that it's both a solitary project and it's collaborative. You get both sides of it. So I can kind of go back and forth between those two things. As to your question, a lot of these connections did start in school, especially in my last degree as a doctoral student. I was there for 4.5 years, and there were a lot of great performers. And many of them remain friends and connections today, professional contacts, but also friends. I do think of it like a giant tree diagram, right? Where you have 3 connections, but then you work on somebody on a project and then they've worked with 3 other people and you get to know some other folks. And then maybe they tell you about a quartet that they're in or some festival that they're going to play. And you learn about some other opportunity through that. So that's been the primary way that my musical network has expanded. And then, going back to just opportunities, I do apply for other opportunities. And one reason is because when those things do come through once in a while, they will inevitably lead to knowing more people and having other people kind of in your circle. And hopefully that'll lead to more projects down the road as well.
You mentioned collaboration. Do you collaborate with your spouse?
Yeah, actually, we're very well matched as an artistic couple too, because we do collaborate, but we do have our separate areas of focus. So even though we're both pianists, I'm more on the composition side of things, and I play jazz, and she's a really brilliant collaborative pianist in the classical tradition. So we do our separate thing, but then I've written many pieces where she's premiered the piece. In fact, now it's kind of become almost a regular thing, but she's played a lot of my music before. In fact, a few years ago, I wrote a piano duo for the 2 of us to play. That was a lot of fun. We performed it many times since I wrote it. So that's one way in which we collaborate. And another way is that I'll ask her to play the piano for something I've written, even if I'm not involved with it.
A lot of playwrights, when they write a new play, they know who they want to act the part and they write the part for that person. Do you write pieces specifically for your wife? Do you hear her playing while you're composing?
Yes, definitely. I think at least most of my teachers in the past and most of the advice I've been given is in line with this. But I would say you always, as a composer, should be writing for a specific person when possible. And that's not always possible. Like a composer can just write a piece for orchestra without necessarily knowing which orchestra it's going to be. But hopefully you do know that as well. But for like individual, like solo pieces and chamber pieces, I pretty much am always writing for a specific person. And in the few times I've written pieces for her, I've certainly have thought about her style or her strengths. Sometimes I write, maybe against those, and I'm thinking about how she might reprimand me or complain about something I've written that is impossible. So it goes the other way too. Sometimes the music takes over, or I have a different idea, and it's not necessarily catered in a way that's going to be easy for them. If you understand what I'm saying, it's like you also want to write something challenging, whether it's aesthetically challenging or technically challenging. I should add, though, she can play anything pretty much, so I'm not worried about writing beyond her ability.
Can you elaborate on this? For those of us who don't have a deep technical knowledge of music, can you explain in like quasi-technical, quasi-layman's terms, what makes a performer's style? Like when you listen and you hear, okay, this piece sounds as if it's being played by this person, what do you hear that alerts you and lets you know this is a signature of this performer or that performer? If you can walk us through that.
It really has to do with both expressive choices about, tempo and phrasing and articulation, and also maybe the tone quality that they have, like the warmth of their vibrato for a certain string instrument, or, other little like minutia that I don't think I'm qualified to even talk to that level of detail. But, in terms of like what I would write for certain performers that I know, it's usually because I've heard them play before. And I really love like, oh, this person, I love how she plays really aggressively on the violin, like in the low register. I heard her play this one piece and there's like this really accented passage. And I just love that sound when she does that. So in my piece, I might take advantage of that characteristic. Or they might tell me something that they like, oh, I love playing really long lyrical lines on the high string of the instrument or the lowest string of the instrument, or I like these types of composers. So, going back to not over catering it, it's like I don't want to just imitate some style so that they're happy, but there's still some kind of essence I might try to capture or harness in my music. And it usually has to do with like attitude and character.
When you're looking back on pieces that you wrote in the past and you're not satisfied with, how do you process that? Because on the one hand, it's hard to live with having put something out into the world that you're no longer satisfied with. But on the other hand, it's actually a good sign that you are continuing every day to improve and learn and develop new techniques that you didn't have before. And so how do you use things that you've done in the past to inform what you're doing now?
I'm really big on that. At the risk of being too self-critical, I'm never quite, this is obviously fairly universal among artists, but I'm never 100% satisfied with what I've done. If I've written something I'm really happy with, it's like 85 to 90%, Maybe it could be better, but the time has passed and I have to move on to the next thing. Or sometimes I don't realize it till much later. And yeah, to me, the answer is, you let it go and other people are going to experience it differently. So that's one of the comforts I draw from it, which is that my 85% satisfaction, other people might just say, wow, that was really great. That totally worked for me. And they might not see it that way. In fact, they probably won't see it that way because they didn't spend 80 hours with it like I did.
I agree with you. But for me, maybe because it's a word thing, but I'm fine if I am not satisfied, which is, I will never be satisfied all the time. I'm like, I wish I could have done it like this. And I want to do this. And I want to maybe even rewrite something in a different way or a different story and do what I didn't do in the previous one. And I live with a Stoic approach to life. I love Stoic philosophy. And I every day reflect on the day, not only a piece of work that I've produced, but I think what's missing is the reaction that you get from other people before you get your work out there. And what I see in a lot of writing nowadays is that there's AI. People just, give it a prompt and it writes things and they're like, yep, I am a writer. And then there's this ideology of I know how to put sentences together, therefore I am a writer. We don't think about storytelling. We don't think about plot. We don't think about characters. We don't think deeply about things. And then later again, you don't have people who are giving you feedback before you get your work out there. And actually, because of this, I decided to launch a group for writers where we read and give each other feedback for free. So if anyone is interested to join our writers group, feel free to reach out through our website, thedatekeepers.com.
Yeah. And you're highlighting a really important difference between composition and maybe writing a novel or something is that we don't really actually get the opportunity for feedback before our piece is premiered, publicly.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with a publisher before, and for publishing a piece, they might suggest a small change or can you make this a little shorter because it's easier to sell this if it's a certain length. And they might make copy editing changes, fixing markings and stuff. But, composition, for better or for worse, is still a completely solitary enterprise until you've made the score and the parts and you've sent it to the performer. And maybe you've had somebody look it over for proofreading. But you don't really even necessarily have a sense of the piece completely, 100% of what it's going to sound like until it's being played in rehearsals. And by that point, you're not really making changes to it because it's the week of the concert. I have revised pieces before, especially in more recent years. I've been a little bit more attentive to changing a piece if it's going to be played again. But overall, I'm just kind of the mindset that I'm going to do it better in the next piece. I'm going to approach the form differently. I'm going to make sure I write the ending first. I'll just try something different in the creative process to address whatever I wasn't happy with.
Can AI write good music?
I don't think so. I haven't spent much time trying. I haven't done anything with that. I've heard some examples floated around online that aren't good at all. But I think that it could probably put together an ambiance or a mood that would be useful in commercial music, perhaps. Combining a few layers together to create a certain mood.
When you hear a piece of music, can you tell whether it was written by AI or just a really incompetent human composer?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've heard enough examples. Last year, I heard there was a presentation and I heard somebody talk about AI's early attempts to compose, and one was trying to imitate the music of Gustav Mahler, and it was terrible. It was a really bad imitation, and I can't remember if I had just heard that and not been told who wrote it, if I would have thought that that was a naive person's imitation of the style, or if it sounded more like an algorithm composing. I think it's more the latter. It does sound kind of robotic, like you took the notes of a scale and then just rolled the dice. But it's an interesting question. I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, the reason I ask is because a lot of people, you see online all the time, like, oh, I know AI wrote this, I know AI wrote that. And then people come and they get frustrated because the AI that is supposed to tell you if AI wrote it told you that AI wrote it and the human says they wrote it. And I'm like, I don't think I can always tell if an AI wrote something or not, but I can tell if it's good or not. And if it's good, I don't think there's any chance that an AI wrote it. If it's poorly written, there are some people who write like that, who write the way that AIs write, that an AI
Yeah.
trained on a lot of that text and knows how to do, because it's simplistic, it's redundant, it's robotic. But
Yeah.
just because it's robotic doesn't mean that it actually came out of a machine. It might have come out of a human who only knows how to do that or who was conditioned to do that. So that's why I'm like, I don't think the question is always, did AI write this? I think a better question is it worth reading?
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, I think in general, as a population, we're probably more sensitive to what AI sounds like in text because we read it all the time now, unfortunately, or at least I see it, And, once you read one of those, you just see it everywhere and it's like, it's grating. It's pretty bad. But I know what you mean because then there will be some subset of people who then copy that style because it sounds, on a certain level, it sounds flashy and kind of attention grabbing.
Easy to
Yeah.
read, like easy for lazy.
Easy to read and easy to produce.
Yeah. It has that kind of cloying tone of like somebody who's always trying to grab your attention with like a buzzword or a phrase. It's like overwritten in a certain way. At least that's some of my experience with it. I think that they've been saying that different LLMs will write differently anyway. They'll have different tones and styles. But in music, this hasn't become a big enough deal yet, at least in my area. I don't think AIs are writing concert music that people want to listen to. And it's hard for me to imagine how that would ever be done, although maybe I'm just kind of a skeptic in that way, or maybe I'm just optimistic about people's individual worth, as artists.
The silver lining of working in a pretty niche field, like you're not writing pop music. It's not like massive populations of people are all showing up at the concert hall, but you've got a pretty good reason to believe that the people who are showing up actually care about the craft of what you're doing and would be deeply put off if they discovered that someone in that space was taking shortcuts instead of actually, putting effort in and trying to create something that is innovative and conveys emotion and conveys new technical ideas. So I think in those relatively small communities, people are not going to be as inclined to give a chance to AI when they're showing up to hear what the humans are doing.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
Do you have anything else you would like to add before we sign off?
I really enjoy talking about this stuff and I love what you guys are doing. And I always get really, as you could probably tell, I get excited about talking about the creative process and also just the difference and similarities between writing and composing. Outside of music, I just read a lot and I'm in awe. This one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because I feel very connected to the writing world, even though I don't do any of that myself. I'm constantly reading novels and short stories and getting inspired by narratives like that.
That's great.
Yeah, we love doing this and we enjoy bringing people like yourself. So thank you for making the time.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to me. And I look forward to keeping up with your work.
It was great talking to you, Ben.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.